Welcome back, Board Game Crusaders. Today we're going to be taking a look at Mage Wars, along with the Conquest of Kumanjaro expansion, Force Master vs. Warlord, and Druid vs. Necromancer. This game is highly addictive and very fun to play, and if you wanted to spend some time on it, you can really make it your own with the different spell books that you have the potential of creating. But more on that in a moment. Here are the tokens and some of the components that you'll be using in the game. This first little section here are the tokens that are utilized specifically with a particular mage or a particular creature that's typically used with a specific mage. I'm not going to be going over any of these tokens in great detail because the rulebook is very fantastic, easy to follow, easy to read. In fact, on page 40 of the rulebook, we see a codex which begins explaining everything alphabetically with pictures and everything you need. This game is so clear and easy to follow. So I know that you're going to want to reference those throughout the game anyway, so I'll leave you to it. Just kind of give you an idea of what things look like. Here we have the condition markers that happen with various conditions. If you put a wizard to sleep, you're going to put the sleep marker on it, or a creature, or whatever. And so on and so forth with all of those. It's a good thing to note right here that these condition markers have a removal cost, indicated by this number circled in gray. And some of them will have it, some of them will not. Now, if it does not have a removal cost, it can't be removed. But all the same, they can't just be removed willy-nilly. In order to remove a condition, you have to have an ability on your mage, or maybe one of your equipment gives you an ability to remove them, or maybe you play something like Lay Hands, which says, among other things, remove as many condition markers as you wish from target creature by paying their removal costs. This is their removal cost right here, and you simply pay that much of your mana to remove the condition marker. Now here are the ones that I am going to go into more detail on, starting with these three. So anytime that you get a +1 ranged, +1 melee, +1 armor, you can just put this on the unit that's impacted by that, and so you can keep track of those a little easier. These did not come in the base game. They come in the Force Master vs. Warlord expansion. Everything we're looking at here does come in the base game, with the exception of this. You're going to see red and blue rather than green, or yellow being the other one that I have for the 4-player expanded tokens. But that's irrelevant at this point. First, we're going to start off with the ready marker. This indicates if a unit does have a specific ability that can be triggered once per turn. That indicates you haven't used it yet, and you can. That indicates that you've used it, and you can no longer use it that turn. These represent mana that certain units or other abilities in the game can generate you, and you just place those on the card, indicating that it's generating that magic. This is the initiative token, which, as most initiative tokens do, indicates who has initiative. Now, most games that I've been going over lately have useless first player or initiative tokens. This is one of the few that has a very valuable initiative token that you're going to want to keep track of. And so, good use for this time. Here we have the health markers, or the wound markers, that are utilized for specific units or cards on the game. They come in 1, 3, and 6 values, or 9 if you'd like. I just think it's easier to refer that to a 6 because 3, 6 is an increment counting in threes, whereas 9 is just kind of random. Do what you will, though. You could also look at it by saying 1 3 times is 3, 3 times is 9. So whatever you want to do. Here's the guard token. Whenever you put a card on guard or a creature on guard, you place this on it to indicate that. These are markers for specific units. This one goes on your mage, Your mage has a quick cast, which it can utilize. This indicates that you can still utilize your quick cast. Flipping it over indicates that you've used your quick cast. And then this is an action marker that goes on all of your cards that have actions. Again, that's available. Flip it over, it's not available. Then here are the dice. The dice come in, well, 3 specific variants you want to look at. There's the 0, which means it was essentially a miss, the 2 and the 1 in starbursts, and then the 2 and the 1 that are not in starbursts. Now, the starbursts indicate critical hits, and the non-starbursts mean that it was not a critical, it was just a regular hit. More on that when we talk about battling. And then there's the 12-sided dice, which will help you track other stats. We also have the player's track card here to keep track of your stats. I'm just going to pull a random wizard here just so we can get an idea of some of the stats here. So right here we have the mana value of a card. That indicates how much a wizard can channel each turn. So this guy had 10. We're going to put a black cube on the 10 spot. Then right here we have the health of the wizard in the heart, 32. So we take a red cube and we put it on the 32 spot. Just like that. And then we take a black cube and we put it on the 0 spot. Just like that. It's pretty important to point out right now that this red marker will rarely ever move on the game. There are certain spells that will allow you to permanently increase your life. If that's the case, this will go up, or decreasing your life will cause it to go down. Whereas when you normally just take damage, if you're taking damage, say you got attacked and take 5 damage, this will go up to the 5. If you heal, say 2, it'll go back down 2 squares. And you'll never want this black cube to get all the way up and meet with the red cube, because as soon as they are in the same spot, your mage is dead, and that's not good for you. Then the other one is just to manage your mana. I'll talk about how you start the game when we get to that point, but this just indicates how much mana you have. And as you use mana or to cast spells, you take it down. As you replenish, possibly with spells or with your channeling at the beginning of your turn, you move it up as much as you need. And that's how you track how much magic you have to do stuff. Your mage will be represented by 2 cards, and of course this, which we've already covered. Now, this card with the artwork represents where your mage is physically on the map. This card is not on the map, but does represent your mage's characteristics. Now, even though it doesn't say it anywhere here, your mage is always considered as a level 6. That may come into play if somebody tries to put them to sleep, or something else where the effect says based on their level is how much mana you have to spend. So if anything like that should come up, your mage is considered a level 6. Here we have the name or the class right here of the mage. Here we have the spell points. When you are building your deck, you'll need to utilize the spell points. The life, which again is the red marker on the life/damage area. Your armor. I don't know of any mages that start with any armor in the game. That's added through the equipment. And then your channeling capabilities right here. Right here, we are looking at the subclass of the mage, and we are looking over here at the type and subtype of the mage over here. Right here we see the training that the school or that the mage has. This will impact the cost of building the spell book and how many pages they can use of specific spells. And then we have any special abilities the mage has indicated here, and their attacks are indicated here. This mage happens to have 2 attacks to choose from. Both are quick, one costs mana, and is a range that'll hit the same zone or the next zone using 3 dice with ethereal damage, or a physical attack that's just a quick attack that rolls 3 dice with no specials. There are several types of cards that you can make up your spellbook with. I'm going to go over those right here, touch on each one briefly. So the ones with the gray around them are the equipment, and we'll get back to those in a moment for more detail. The ones with the purple are the incantations. The ones with the orange are the enchantments. The ones with the red are the attacks. Anyone guess what the green ones are? Conjurations, good job. And then the brown ones are the creatures. The way these are laid out is fairly generic, but I'll go over kind of the breakdown of the differences in a moment. You're going to have the spell name up the top. This is the Vine Snapper. You're going to have the type. This is a creature, and the subtype. It's a plant and vine creature. Right here we have the casting cost. So this costs 7 mana. That's this bad stuff here. Or good stuff, I guess. That good stuff. And this will cost 7 to get out. It is a full action to get out. These cards, well, the cards in general will come in either full or quick action up here. And that is the area of effect you can cast this. If it's a 0/0, that means it must be played in the zone that whatever's casting it is in. If it is a 0/1, for instance, it can be cast in the zone you're in to the adjacent zone, and so on and so on. Sometimes it'll have a 1/2, which means it can't be played in the zone you're in, but it can be played 1 zone away and then 2 zones away if you'd like. Right here tells where the card can be played. This can be played in the zone. It affects the zone, whereas other cards like this can be played on living creatures. There are also undead creatures and vine creatures, as we see here. And so there's all kinds of classifications where this will, holy creatures, dark creatures, so there's all kinds of classifications right here that you'll need to pay attention to when you're casting your cards. Right here, the tree we're looking at on this card happens to represent the School of Magic. There are several schools of magic in the game that we can go over when we're talking about building decks. Here is the level of the spell, which comes into play when you're building decks, but also some things like sleep, for instance, depending on the level of the spell, indicates how much mana you have to use to make the creature go to sleep. So this is a level 2 creature. You'd have to spend 5 mana to make it go to sleep, just in that instance. Here's the armor rating. That means, well, how much armor it has. We'll go over that when we talk about attacking. Health rating, we'll go over that also when we go over attacking. If it has any effects, they'll be down here. This happens to be a creature, so its effects are attacks and has some traits or characteristics that that creature has. Other cards have actual effects, such as that you'll want to refer to the codex for things like Mage Bind and Ages. But that is, sometimes creatures will even have effects, by the way. But that's pretty much the overlay of the cards in general. Now as you take a closer look at your cards, you're going to notice that all of them follow that specific generic outline. For instance, the enchantments, they have 2 different casting costs. I'm going to go over what that means right now. So this first casting cost is always going to be 2 for these. And that is when you have to pay attention to this, whether it's a quick or a full action and what the range is and what the target is. Then you pay this casting cost and you place it according to those stats, having line of sight and range and all that other good stuff. So this one affects living creatures, so let's bring the Vine Snapper in. It happens to be a living creature. What this eyes closed means, you pay the 2 and you place it just like that. Now once it's placed like that, the creature can move around, do whatever it wants. This does not impact the creature in any way until you pay the other cost to flip it around. So in this case you'd pay 2, unless you were paying it on a mage, then you'd pay 4 because it's 2 plus 2 for the Mage Bind, which again, refer to the codex. The important thing to note here is for the second cost, you don't have to have line of sight. You don't have to utilize a quick or a full action. It's a free move. You've already utilized all that when you played it initially. So as a free action, you can pay that cost if you have it available without paying attention to range, line of sight, or anything to reveal this, which is pretty cool. But as with everything, there's always an exception. You cannot interrupt an event to reveal the enchantment. So in other words, you can play it at the end of any phase of the game round or at the beginning. You can play it immediately after the creature is activated, before it chooses its actions for the turn, or immediately after a creature completes its move action but before it takes a quick action, or at the end of any of the single 8 steps of an attack or 3 steps of casting a spell. Now we're going to go over all that in more detail, but just bear this in mind when we're going over that. It's going to be important, or maybe review this again. You can also choose just to reveal it immediately once you play it, so this one happens to be a good thing for your creature, and if you don't care about surprising your enemy with it or bluffing them, you can just play 4 right up front and put it on the Vine Snapper. Now these, being placed face down, can be a good bluff. You can have this Divine Protection, and you can play it face down on your opponent. For all they know, that's going to be a powerful curse, and they may waste some mana and a card to try to flush that out and get rid of it. So, lots of strategy in those. Now while we're looking at these, there's also this red indicator instead of a regular purple indicator. What that means is that if the event indicated down here is triggered, then the card has to be revealed at that time. If you don't have the mana to reveal it, or you forget to reveal it, the card becomes destroyed. So in this case, it's revealed when a creature moves into the zone. So this creature's taking a walk, he moves into the zone. You don't have the mana, the 2 that it would cost to reveal this. Or you forget that it's there and you don't pay any attention, and they continue moving on. This then became a wasted card. You remove it from the board immediately, or as soon as you remember. So try to keep mana on hand if you are going to be placing any traps anywhere. Kind of a good rule of thumb there. Equipment cards also have special rules on them. You also have this spot right here which indicates what kind of a weapon there is. There are helmets, cloaks, chest pieces, gloves, boots. There's weapons, there's shields, there's belts, there's rings, there's amulets. There are even some that say weapon or shield. Basically, that comes into play because you can only have an item equipped to one of each spot. So you can only have one helmet on at a time. Go figure. Now, with weapons and shields, you can have one weapon and one shield. Again, some of the weapons will indicate they can go in either spot, so you could have a dual weapon if you'd like, but that's kind of how it goes. Some of them will say that they take the weapon and the shield spot in the case of some of the powerful staves. So just keep an eye on that kind of stuff when you're placing your equipment on your mage. The only exception to the rule, because there's always an exception to the rule, is the rings. You can have 2 rings attached to any mage at any given time. Now, let's say you had the Fire Shaper ring and another ring on your mage, and you don't want the Fire Shaper ring anymore. It doesn't cost anything to take the ring off. You can take the ring off, put it back in your spellbook for later use, and then just cast the cost to put on another equipment if you'd like in its place. That's not a problem. Now, if the equipment gets destroyed, then obviously you destroy it just like you would any other spell. Which brings me to yet another good point. You can have 2 rings on at a time, but there is another rule that says each character or mage can only have, well, I should say by character I don't mean just mages. Characters meaning your monsters, your creatures, or mages, or anything, zones. They can only have one of each card name attached to it. So even though your mage can wear 2 rings, it can't wear 2 Fire Shaper rings. And even though any of your creatures could have Divine Protection, any one creature cannot have 2 Divine Protections on it. Now you can have Divine Protection on one creature and another one on another creature, but you can't put 2 on the same creature. And just like that works, one zone cannot have 2 Hellfire traps. One zone can have a Hellfire trap and some other trap unless it says that it's a zone exclusive item. So this says it's a zone exclusive, meaning that you can only have one conjuration in that zone at any given time anyway. So again, all of these traits I'm not really going to cover because they're on page 40 in that awesome codex, and you're going to want to look them up at first anyway a lot. If I go over them now, they'll just be forgotten, so keep an eye on the codex. Now, these are also a little unique, these attack spells. They're unique in the fact that they are counted as a spell and as an attack. So if you have a card that would modify an attack or modify a spell, they can both be utilized against these attack spells. Also, typically they will target one individual creature unless it has this little symbol. That little symbol indicates that it affects a whole zone. So just keep an eye for that. Another thing to bear in mind with cards in general is this little magic hand. That little magic hand means that at the beginning of your turn, which we'll cover in the turn details, you get to place one of these on the area. Now, some of the conjurations have this. For example, this one is a spawn point, which means it can spawn units based on the instructions on the card. So the way that's going to work is as long as you're following the instructions on the card, you can use this mana plus whatever mana you've got in your pool here to cast creatures out of this area. So that's a pretty cool thing. It gives you some extra mana and some extra creatures you can play, because as we'll find out later on, your beginning spell selection for the turn is limited unless you've got these or familiars. Familiars are also things that can help you cast specific spells. It'll say familiar in here, and they'll also have a generation that they can utilize. And anytime you are casting something from one of these areas, you have to use the mana on it before you resort to this mana. That's never been a real issue for anyone I've played with. It's kind of good to have this free mana. You kind of want to save this up for other things anyway. This mana can also not port over to this chart unless the card specifically says that it can. Let's see, I feel like I'm missing something else. Yes, let's cover the walls. Walls have several other key indicators up here that you'll notice. The walls key indicators are referenced on page 17. Essentially, this means that you cannot cross through this wall because that's passage blocked. This means that you cannot see through this because the passage has also, or the site has also been blocked. There are also some, if I can find a for instance, probably not, that have kind of looking like an open door with a sword laid across it. That means that if you pass through it, you will get damage for passing through it. And that's kind of the only two kinds of walls there are. There's the kind that you can't pass through, and the kinds that you can pass through, but that'll do you damage, like the wall of fire, for instance. And not all walls will block sight either. So there's a couple of key traits here that I'm going to go over that I'm not going to make you rely on the codex for, because they do come up quite a bit. That's the incorporeal versus corporeal. I hope I'm saying that right. And the living versus non-living. So the corporeal, or corporeal, I don't know how to pronounce it, are creatures that were, as this card depicts, elemental cards or other such cards that really can't be contained. In fact, they have the uncontainable trait, which I will let you check the codex for, the non-living trait, and the burn-proof trait. Even cooler than that, in order to damage one of these, you have to roll a 1. Any 1s will damage it as normal. Any 2s are considered as though they were 0. So they're a little bit harder to kill there, which is good because you actually cannot equip armor on an incorporeal creature, whereas a corporeal creature is anything that doesn't say otherwise. Let's see, what else with incorporeal creatures? If there is an ethereal trait attack, such as the wizard's main attack here, it's an ethereal attack, they can attack incorporeal creatures just like normal. So 2s would count as normal 2s. So they can be vanquished pretty easily with one of those attacks. Another creature type is the non-living. Now this one's non-living just because it's incorporeal, but there are other non-living creatures such as zombies and mechanical beasts and constructs you can summon. The difference between the living and the non-living that are built into the abilities is living creatures can be healed and they can be put to sleep. Non-living creatures cannot be put to sleep. They cannot be healed because they have the finite life quality, and they also have poison immunity if they're non-living. So a couple of key factors there that, again, you don't have to refer to the codex because they come up a little more frequently. And I don't think I've got any armies that don't deal with corporeal, incorporeal, living, and non-living. So there's that.